I am my brother's keeper. And when you say the name Jacob Blake, make sure you say father. Make sure you say cousin. Make sure you say son. Make sure you say uncle. But most importantly, make sure you say human. Human life. Let it marinate in your mouth, in your minds. A human life. Just like every single one of y'all and everywhere around the world. We're human. And his life matters. So many people have reached out to me telling me they're sorry that this happened to my family. Well, don't be sorry, because this has been happening to my family for a long time. Longer than I can account for. It happened to Emmett Till. Emmett Till is my family. Philando, Mike Brown, Sandra. This has been happening to my family. And I've shared tears for every single one of these people that it's happened to. This is nothing new. I'm not sad. I'm not sorry. I'm angry. And I'm tired. I haven't cried one time. I stopped crying years ago. I am numb. I have been watching police murder people that look like me for years. I'm also a Black History minor. So not only have I been watching it in the 30 years that I've been on this planet, but I've been watching it for years before we were even alive. I'm not sad. I don't want your pity. I want change.
Powerful words there as we start today's show. That was Jacob Blake's sister, Letitra Weidman, addressing the media in Kenosha, Wisconsin, talking about thankfully not the killing of her brother. I'm sorry, these instances have become so routine to say that the person was murdered. Just slipped out. But no, Jacob is alive. He is in the hospital. He is recovering from 7 gunshot wounds, and he is currently paralyzed. And we are definitely hoping and praying that Jacob makes a full recovery. Welcome to today's show, everybody. It's Stir Crazy, episode number 82, When the People Strike Back. We are in the midst of very interesting times, to say the least, in the United States of America, where police brutality, police accountability, it's something that is ongoing, perpetual, in the middle of a global pandemic. We're seeing people take to the streets to reclaim their rights or claim them for the first time. And now we're seeing a white supremacist response where there were 2 protesters killed in the streets of Kenosha by a 17-year-old terrorist, allegedly by a 17-year-old terrorist, who has been finally brought into custody after he was allowed to leave the entire state and make it all the way home before he was arrested, despite having numerous interactions with police the night of these murders. So we have a lot to get into. Of course, we're going to talk about the way that the sports world has reacted and responded to all of this, the unprecedented strike. I'm really tired of people calling it a boycott by NBA players. It was a strike. You withhold your work, you withhold your labor, you are striking. You are not boycotting. Initiated by the Milwaukee Bucks, postponed / canceled Game 5 of the NBA playoffs versus the Orlando Magic, and all these other professional sports leagues followed suit, including the WNBA, which has been a leader on these types of stances for a while now. Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer. It was a domino effect after the Bucks took their stand yesterday. So we're going to talk about a lot of that. So let's just get into the conversation. Let me introduce our 2 wonderful panelists joining us today. Our own visuals and research producer here at The Real News, Andrew Corkery. They also call him Mr. Thursday. And of course, Baltimore activist and artist / rapper Eze Jackson joining us again, friend of the show. Boys, gentlemen, thank y'all so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having
us. It's always good being on here with you, Kim.
I love having you on here, Eze. So let's start in Kenosha, y'all. Kenosha has been wowed. And there's a lot of different places that we could begin. So let me get to my notes here, because I have this organized somewhat. So let's go to this tweet, Dwayne, the one that's right underneath V1, because the police officer who has been identified as the one who shot Jacob Blake. He is Kenosha police officer. His name is Rustin Shetsky. He is a 7-year veteran of the police force. He is currently on administrative leave, as reported here by Jacqueline Pizer. Now, according to this, the Wisconsin Department of Justice says that Mr. Blake told investigators that he had a knife in his possession. No updates on whether or not the officer will be charged. The officer is not charged as of today, gang. Now, of course, whether or not the officer gets charged is almost an ancillary issue at this point, because what we're looking at is something so deep and big and systemic. But the fact that the media is hyping on the fact that Jacob was carrying this knife, not even on his person, in his vehicle. Eze, I want to start with you, because like I was talking to Andrew before we went live on the air, this is America. Everybody is carrying some sort of weaponry. If it's not a straight up firearm, it's going to be a knife. It's going to be a taser. It's going to be mace. It's going to be pepper spray. I mean, this is a country where people carry weapons upon them. And if that's not unusual, nor is it illegal in a lot of spots, especially in Wisconsin. It was not illegal for Jacob Blake to be carrying a knife in his truck. Why is it that the media takes this piece of information presented by police and, without explicitly saying so, basically saying it was a justified reason for him to now have 7 bullets in his body?
Yeah, no, I think there is this, we all know, we have this conversation every time this happens. There is an extreme fear of Black men from law enforcement, from white men, white individuals in this country. There's an extreme fear of us, and anything is an excuse to kill us. We've seen this, from toy guns to selling cigarettes and DVDs to having your own registered firearm on you. Anything is an excuse to kill a Black man in this country.
Andrew, I want us to talk about how, obviously, the big juxtaposition of how Jacob Blake is in hospital right now, paralyzed, 7 bullets in his body. But the person who actually killed 2 protesters, or allegedly killed 2 protesters on the streets of Kenosha, 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, was allowed to walk the streets freely with the AR-15, even having friendly dialogues with the police. I mean, this contradiction is so glaring.
Yeah, this is just a microcosm of a larger trend within the law enforcement of the United States of America that is actively infiltrated by white supremacists. So it's not surprising that people espouse these views and then they want to go into law enforcement. And it's not surprising that once they espouse those views and are in law enforcement, they act as such as the officers did in Kenosha, Wisconsin, when this individual had already killed 2 people and fled the scene. And, they gave him bottles of water and all these sorts of things. So, this is just, should not be considered an isolated incident, as you and Eze are talking about. This should be considered in a wealth of incidents that are part of a broader trend of a white supremacist reactionary state that does not value Black life and apparently values 17-year-old, white supremacist vigilantes who literally roam the streets of, cities where they're not even a part of, and states where they don't even live. And then they use this self-defense tactic, and people like Tucker Carlson and other people come out and say that, they had to do this because the state didn't act quickly enough to stop this. The problem is they're conflating this property damage issue with actual violence. And that has to stop too, because the property damage, that shit gonna be taken care of at some point. We're talking about human lives. And as soon as people start switching the conversation from human lives and dignity and humanity of Black and brown people in this country to, some 7-Eleven that gets his window broken, we see clearly what the priorities are at that point.
Dwayne, let's pop up that tweet because Kyle Rittenhouse, 17 years old, is being charged with first-degree murder in the killing of two people, one of whom was protester Anthony Huber, who leaves behind a daughter and a girlfriend. And there has been a GoFundMe set up in Anthony's name. Yep, there's his picture there. And, you know, we definitely salute the fallen comrade who is out there on the streets trying to express and demand unity, unity, freedom, liberation, justice for Black people in his community. So Anthony Huber, we definitely want to lift up his name and remember the sacrifice that he laid out there on the line for Black lives. But I'm not even really sure where to go right now because there was so much like infuriating stuff coming out of Kenosha. Dwayne, let's look at the video of Kyle Rittenhouse prior to the shooting. This video has been widely circulated. It has been confirmed that he is the individual in the video talking, and he's holding his AR, and he doesn't look like he's playing, by the way. And by the way, Wisconsin is an open carry state, but you have to be 18 years of age or older to open carry. He was 17, so the police really should have locked him up off the break, but clearly that didn't happen. But let's take a look at and listen to his words before he allegedly killed two people there in Kenosha.
We're protecting from the citizens, and I just got pepper sprayed by a person in the crowd.
So you had non-lethal, but you didn't respond.
We don't have non-lethal.
So you guys are full on ready to defend the property?
Yes, we are.
All right. Next, I want us to hear from the chief of police in Kenosha, who gave the most tone-deaf press conference, given the circumstances that are happening there in his town. But this is what he had to say about the people that lost their lives.
Everybody involved was out after the curfew. I'm not going to make a great deal of that, but the point is the curfew's in place to protect. Had persons not been out involved in violation of that, perhaps the situation that unfolded would not have happened. So the last night, a 17-year-old individual from Antioch, Illinois, was involved in the use of firearms to resolve whatever conflict was in place. The result of it was two people are dead.
Eze Jackson, the cop just said, to start off his comments, that if they had not been out there past the curfew, maybe the tragic incident would not have happened. At the same time, the terrorist, who didn't even reside in the state, was also out there past that curfew and breaking the firearms law of Wisconsin, but was allowed to engage and receive water and thanks from the police out there. I mean, just this general disconnect that people who are on the side of Black lives need to adhere to the letter of the law 100%. Meanwhile, the people who are actually violating the law and happen to align themselves with ideals of white supremacy, well, you know, sometimes all laws and rules are not meant to be followed.
Yeah. Oh, no, there's no disconnect. It's obvious. This is white supremacy, and it's blatant. There's no disconnect. They're being very clear in their communication and in their messaging. They are encouraging this kind of behavior, so it's happening. And now they're making examples out of people, they've been warning us about this since Minnesota, right? The whole conversation blew up on their side. Minnesota, you come here, we're going to be packing. You coming out town, we're going to be packing. We're going to be ready. We're going to be ready. Like this has been the tone in the white supremacist circles ever since Minnesota. It was brewing way before that, but this year in particular, when everything went down in Minnesota, that's when those groups started to talk like this. And what happened in Kenosha is what they wanted to happen. This is white supremacy in play in real time.
Can I just say something real quick about the
yeah, go
cop?
ahead.
I was just going to say that, like, him saying that, you know, if these people hadn't have been out on the streets, this might have not happened. If you're a dumbass police force wasn't out there, ruining the lives of people of color on a constant and consistent basis and enabling white supremacists to feel like they're emboldened to go out there and do this nonsense, we wouldn't be in this position either. So really, who is the fault on? The people who are being oppressed and who are fighting for just basic human rights and human dignity, or the people who are actively terrorizing communities of color across the country as a result of a white supremacist police force? So that was not mentioned in what he had to say about that. And it's clear that the police departments are on the opposite side of this movement. They're on the wrong side of history, and they are going to keep their power at any cost imaginable, including the lives of other people. So it's not surprising, and I agree with Eze that this is baked in. I mean, this is part of the structure that exists. It's not some new phenomenon.
But what's ironic to me is, for one, we're seeing this increased presence of white supremacists in attending these marches, right? I'm thinking of either over the weekend or the previous week out in Portland, where we saw the Proud Boys show up and start assaulting protesters, start beating them with objects, which was nuts to see. And then we see this tragic incident happen in Kenosha, where this teenage alleged terrorist was enticed out to come out of state and try to protect property that didn't even belong to him. But the police are kind of given this wink in this not subtle acceptance of the presence of these white supremacists at these types of events. I mean, what the fuck are protesters supposed to do when you have now two entities that are working to not only oppress your rights to be out there expressing your freedom of speech in the first place, but also mean to do you harm, Eze? I mean, when the Freddie Gray uprisings happened in Baltimore in 2015, I don't think it was that kind of white supremacist element that was showing up out there in the streets with the protesters, but maybe I could be wrong. What do you recall?
Them cowards are not coming to a city like Baltimore. It's a chocolate city. They're not going to come. They're not going to go to Detroit or Philly or Chicago or Miami or LA or Houston. They're not going to do none of that stuff there. They'll go to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where they can safely do their thing with the assistance of the police. And to your question of what protesters are supposed to do, I think what they are expecting protesters to do is just shut up and accept things for the way they are. Make America great again means take it back to the days when niggas kept their mouths shut and stayed in their place. And this is what they want from us. They want the niggas and the nigger lovers to stay in their place and accept things the way they are and shut up. And if you don't, we're going to kill you. We're going to shoot you.
I wanted to take a listen to Fox News' Tucker Carlson. I'm so sorry to do this to everybody. My bad. But Tucker Carlson has a big following from those on the right. Of course, we know Fox News has been a purveyor of all this white nationalist, white supremacist ideology for probably its entire inception. But this is what Tucker Carlson had to say about the 17-year-old alleged teenage terrorist killing people because he had to maintain order. Let's take a listen to that, Dwayne.
So are we really surprised that looting and arson accelerated to murder? How shocked are we that 17-year-olds with rifles decided they had to maintain order when no one else would?
Andrew, your thoughts about Tucker Carlson saying that 17-year-olds armed with AR-15s have to be the ones to go out there and maintain order. Meanwhile, Jacob Blake lies in a hospital bed, 7 bullets in his back for what exactly?
I mean, morally, ethically, spiritually, he's totally wrong. But if you actually look at the way that America was founded, it's not uncommon to come to that understanding, as incorrect as it might be. I mean, we are a nation that is founded on white slaveholder vigilantes that seceded from Great Britain. So, I mean, it's not surprising that ethos and that historical legacy has extended to what the right wing now justifies as a policy to implement order in cities, because apparently the cities aren't instituting order. But the problem is that he has a has a view of order that doesn't include people of color, that doesn't include, brown people, that doesn't include anyone that's out of that marginal sect of right-wing ideology. And so if you don't like our version of society that doesn't care about the poor, that doesn't care about people of color, and doesn't care about the downtrodden, then to hell with you. And, you have to basically do what Eze said, which is just shut up and accept things as they are and move on. And if not, we will restore order. Restore order is just a dog whistle for exactly what Eze laid out before. And it's not surprising that these vigilantes are inspired by the right-wing movement of this country that is fundamentally ideologically aligned with the historical narrative of white supremacy and white vigilantism that is the founding of this nation.
Right.
It just circles back to the dehumanization of Black people and people of color in this country, because the whole reason people are in the streets is because the law does not apply to police. When police kill unarmed people or shoot unarmed people and they are not held accountable, the law is not working. But the law applies to everybody else, especially Black people. Double, triple applies to Black people. And that's the reason why people are so furious. So how in the world can order be expected when the law is not being followed? The law only applies to some and not to all. But y'all, I wanted to take a look, if we could, about the reaction to the shooting of Jacob Blake, especially coming from the sports world. We saw some unprecedented things happen yesterday, which happened to be the 4th year anniversary of the first time that discredited or dismissed in a former NFL player, Colin Kaepernick, first took a knee in a game to symbolize his frustration with police brutality and its ongoing effects. That was 4 years ago. That's incredible. So yesterday in Orlando, inside the NBA bubble, the Milwaukee Bucks, of course, the home team of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 40 miles away from Kenosha, got together before Game 5 they were scheduled to have with the Orlando Magic and said that they were not going to play. They did not take the floor. They did not warm up. They didn't do none of that shit. What they did do is they gathered in front of the press and they read a statement that they had agreed upon in advance of their decision to strike, basically. They didn't boycott the game. They refused to play. So that was good on them. But let's take a look at that statement that they gave to the press, Dwayne.
Well, as you can see, we all thank you guys for taking upon your time to stay here with us. We're sorry that it took a little bit more time, but we thought it would be best for us as a team to brainstorm a little bit, educate ourselves, and not rush into having raw emotion, giving you guys things like that. So on behalf of ourselves and our team, we're going to place a statement as a team today and go back and continue to educate ourselves and get better awareness of what's going on, and then speak to you guys later. So we'll come up with a statement now.
Our team statement. The past 4 months have shed a light on the ongoing racial injustices facing our African American community. Citizens around the country have used their voices and platforms to speak out against these wrongdoings. Over the last few days in our home state of Wisconsin, we've seen the horrendous video of Jacob Blake being shot in the back 7 times by a police officer in Kenosha, and the additional shooting of protesters. Despite the overwhelming plea for change, there has been no action. So our focus today cannot be on basketball.
When we take the court and represent Milwaukee and Wisconsin, we are expected to play at a high level, give maximum effort, and hold each other accountable. We hold ourselves to that standard, and in this moment, we are demanding the same from lawmakers and law enforcement. We are calling for justice for Jacob Blake and demand the officers be held accountable. For this to occur, it is imperative for the Wisconsin State Legislature to reconvene after months of inaction and take up meaningful measures to address issues of police accountability, brutality, and criminal justice reform. We encourage all citizens to educate themselves, take peaceful and responsible action, and remember to vote on November 3rd on behalf of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you guys intend to finish the season?
So that was the Milwaukee Bucks yesterday inside the NBA bubble. That set off a cascade of sports teams, different leagues, announcing that they too were not going to play games yesterday, including some teams in Major League Baseball, including the WNBA. Can we show that video from the Washington Mystics? Dwayne, the WNBA players go extra hard. This is them walking through the tunnel. And if you look at the back of their T-shirts, every single one of them has 7 holes in the back of their T-shirt when they finally do turn the camera to look at the back of their shirts. Here we go. Those 7 holes representing the 7 bullets in the back of Jacob Blake. WNBA, again, like I said, has been a long-time leader on making political and social statements, unified as a league and also as teams. So shout out to the Washington Mystics going extra hard. I believe they are your WNBA 2019 world champs. Don't y'all forget it. But I wanted to get everyone's take about what these demonstrations mean and what they could potentially mean in a broader sense. The NBA players have since announced that they will resume their playoffs either Friday or Saturday. They have not quite made a decision. But Eze, I mean, I have not ever seen professional athletes sacrificed in this way beyond Colin Kaepernick, right? What was your take on yesterday's events and what that could mean going forward?
I'm just super proud of these athletes. Like, you know, I think that for a long time, particularly in the Black community, we've been calling for athletes to step up and say something about the conditions in our communities, about police brutality, even about crime in inner cities. You know, growing up in the 90s, it was a big thing. Guys were being murdered for wearing Jordans. And there was a call for Michael Jordan to do something, to say something. And for so many years, you know, athletes have been quiet. And I think now they're really understanding and owning their influence. I love the articulation those brothers had when they called on the state legislature, because now what you're watching is in real time also, you're watching these state legislators intentionally continue to ignore the problem and the solutions. And you know, it can only happen for so long because so much money goes into sports. So many people spend money on sports, and I think it is a unifying thing. Look, I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. I love going to Baltimore Ravens games. And I'm very aware that I'm sitting in the stands rooting for the Ravens with white supremacists. You know what I'm saying? With police officers and, you know, people that I don't agree with on a day-to-day basis, but we're coming together to watch this game. So I think that I think it's beautiful to see athletes owning their influence right now, because it's one of the few places where you can bring people together in this country, and that's around sports. So if you take that away, you know, hopefully more people will start paying attention and something starts getting done.
Andrew Corkery, a lot of people were saying that what the NBA players and subsequent other players from other leagues did by taking a work stoppage in the form of this, you know, mini strike, you know, whatever the duration of it might be, could be the catalyst to maybe spur a general strike, a general work stoppage in order to force change upon the issue about police brutality. What are your thoughts about this small but big incident yesterday, beginning with the Milwaukee Bucks possibly being the kindling to really get something really big going?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was very interesting. I think that it was a sort of an extension of what really happened during COVID when we didn't have, you know, these sporting events like in the initial first months of the lockdown. And that really kind of created the impetus for a lot of these larger political movements around racial injustice and social inequality in our society that were spawned after the murder of George Floyd. And so to see that come back into the forefront and have sports stop, you know, again, because of that, because of the same issue that wasn't solved before, and really drawing attention to it from every single major media outlet and every single outlet in the world, was really important. And I don't think that the NBA players, previously realized before what happened with this moment yesterday, how much power they actually wield in being able to be agents of change through the culture. Now, what I will say is, though, that some of the sponsors of these leagues and things of that nature, things like Chase Bank and all of these different financial conglomerates and all of the things that are advertised during all these sporting events, they are part and parcel of a system that supports the white supremacy and oppression of Black people and Black communities around the country. So to have this conversation about sports and how the stoppage could lead to a general strike is important. But at the same time, we have to recognize the foundational aspects of some of these leagues and how they generate revenue is through the selling out of Black communities through these institutions that advertise on, sports programming. So I think that the next step for this will be further incorporating critique of that. And I'm not sure if that's something that people are really ready to discuss, or if we're really there yet as a society.
Oh man, I know Eze Jackson is probably ready to talk about it. As much money from the state of Maryland as the Camden Yards and Raven Stadium got, and what they not even paying their water bill down there at Raven Stadium. Eze Jackson, do I have that right?
Yeah, it's true. They're okay, unlike a lot of us out here during this pandemic. But still with sports, that's where that money comes, and a lot of that money comes from it, and it has come from. So through endorsements and all that stuff. So hitting them where it hurts, I think, is awesome to see.
Yeah. Well, guys, it was an interesting. It's been a weird week. Obviously, starting with the shooting of Jacob Blake and the murder of Trayford Pellerin in Lafayette, Louisiana. We were scheduled actually to have two guests on today from Louisiana joining us from the NAACP, their chapter there. But obviously with the hurricane coming through, power and internet were sparse. So they weren't able to join us today. So hopefully they'll be able to join us next week and kind of bring us up to speed of what's happening down in Louisiana, because there's a lot going on down there as well. But last night was was it the final night or the next to final night of the Republican National Convention? We
got one more night of this nonsense, I think.
Oh, I can't. It's the Klans people without the sheets, right? They wore their nice suits. They left their their robes hanging in the closet. I can't watch these people and take them.
And they didn't invite Candace Owens to speak.
Oh, hey,
yeah,
man.
Such a shame.
Did old girl talk from Baltimore County or Baltimore City, Kimberly Classic or Classic? What's her name?
I'm not sure. Yeah, Kimberly Classic. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they like her. Anywho, let's take a look at a nice montage that Andrew put together for us of some of the best of the worst of last night's speeches at the RNC. Let's take a look at that.
There's no doubt how President Trump sees America. He sees America for what it is. A nation that has done more good in this world than any other.
This is not just a choice between Republican and Democrat or left and right. This is an election that will decide if we keep America America or if we head down an uncharted, frightening path towards socialism.
I learned that in America, limited means does not make for limited dreams. The promise of America belongs to us all.
If you want a president who falls silent when our heritage is demeaned or insulted, he's not your man.
In recent months, we've seen weak, spineless politicians cede control of our great American cities to violent mobs. Defund the police is the rallying cry for the new radical Democrat Party. Joe Biden will not do what it takes to maintain order.
There always will be people who have far more than us. Our responsibility is to focus on those who have far less than us. President Trump has done precisely that.
And with President Donald Trump in the White House for 4 more years, and with God's help, we will make America great again.
President Trump is the law and order president, from our borders to our backyards. President Trump will keep America America. Under President Trump's leadership, women's unemployment hit the lowest level since World War II.
For many of us, women's empowerment is not a slogan. It comes not from strangers on social media or sanitized language in a corporate handbook. It comes from the everyday heroes who nurture us, who shape us, and who believe in us.
And 600,000 women have been lifted out of poverty, all since President Trump took office.
100 years ago, women secured the right to vote. So let's vote, America. Let's honor our heroes. Let's re-elect President Trump and Vice President Pence for 4 more years.
Oh, don't. I mean, it just was stinky. Like, I mean, that whole clip just looked like fart. It was just farts talking. And I'm so annoyed. This whole 19th Amendment, like, I saw my local news broadcast doing this, and we saw 2 helicopters flying yesterday over RFK Stadium. They were piloted by women pilots, honoring the 19th Amendment 100th anniversary. I'm like, bitch, white women got the motherfucking right to vote in the 19th Amendment. What? Why do y'all keep omitting that piece out of it? But, forget that. Let's get back to the speeches here, gang. When Mike Pence talks about Joe Biden's America is one that is devoid of law and order, I wonder, has Mike Pence ever met Joe Biden? Eze Jackson, the Republicans are, I wish the Republicans were talking about a Democratic Party that I could get behind. Where are these socialists that want to defund the police? What can I vote for that person? Are they even referring to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
I know. I think they think Bernie got it. I think they think Bernie won the nomination.
They think AOC on the ticket. That's it too.
I think that it's so crazy to watch the messaging that's like obvious, and I almost would kill to be a fly on the wall in like Republican strategist meetings and like these communications meetings and speech writers and stuff, because it's just like you're really selling this to this demographic, and they believe it. I mean, this is stuff that you hear people repeat in coffee shops, in gas stations, just in passing. Like you hear people repeating this stuff, and it's really dangerous. I mean, I laugh at it to keep from crying, but it's dangerous rhetoric that's just created to just continue to perpetuate this fear, which I think largely is still fear of Black lives, like we were talking about at the top of the show.
Also, too, I think the most salient point that was addressed in that whole clip that I spent time putting together was, this idea that if Joe Biden gets elected, America will no longer be America. And what does that concept mean? That concept means that, white supremacy will no longer be the currency, I guess, upon which we base our entire foundational society. I mean, exactly. Like, what is the message that they're sending that it will no longer be America? Because what is America to them? America to them is a white supremacist society that oppresses people of color, oppresses the poor, and makes the poor whites hate poor blacks. That's literally their whole entire ethos. And for me, when Trump's, daughter-in-law said that if Joe Biden gets elected, America will no longer be America, that's exactly what that means. I mean, there's almost no subtext. It's like, it's just, that's how clear cut it is. And so I agree with you, Eze. It's like, to be a fly on the wall in some of these Republican strategist meetings where they're like trying to decide whether they want to have like a white supremacist flute or like a white supremacist bullhorn, to kind of get their message across. And that's kind of like the semantical issue about, what the end result of the policy is. And so, it's a caricature, but at the same time, it's incredibly dangerous. And to kind of allow this white supremacist faction to maintain stability inside of the White House and maintain, the levers of power of our society is going to cause undue harm to so many people. And so for me personally, I just look at Joe Biden. I don't look at him as some revolutionary, Che Guevara person like the Republicans seem to be characterizing him as. But I look at him as a harm reduction vote and someone that we can have in there that's not going to cause the immediate elimination and or destruction of communities of color to the extent that the Trump administration is. And then from there, we can have a tangible debate about what policies we need to put forward and push his ass out the White House at some point.
Yeah.
You guys, what are those debates going to look like? Either the presidential debates or the vice presidential debates, when Trump Pence tries to tell Biden Harris that they are so radical that they want to defund the police. And both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to have to trot out their records and stand on them bitches with pride. You know what I mean? Like, we advocated or we legislated X amount of millions of billions of dollars for law enforcement. We stood shoulder to shoulder with law enforcement. We've always
wanted all them black people in jail. That's literally that's what they're gonna say.
That's what that is going to be like the literal exchange that happens in one of these or more of these debates. Like, no, I actually locked up more black people. Oh yeah, well I want us to lock up more black people, or I advocated for the building of all these prisons. Oh yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a one-upmanship on how they use law enforcement to fuck over black and brown communities. I mean, it's going to be a dystopian type of event without a doubt. I don't know. What do y'all think how do y'all think Biden Harris is going to respond to being called radical leftists and people who are not in favor of law and order in a live presidential, vice presidential debate setting?
I think what we're going to see is we're going to see them own it, right? I think we're going to see them present themselves as more radical. I think we're going to see them present themselves as far left as they can push it, which we have seen with almost every Democratic candidate, over the years. The truth is they don't have the muscle, the support in Congress, or the basic ability to actually deliver on those things. But what they can do is they can make sure that they get the votes on the left that they need to beat a Donald Trump and Mike Pence. So I think when the right is accusing them of being radical, they are going to own it. They're going to, say, we made mistakes in the past, I think they're going to own up to some of the mistakes because they're going to get called on that. I think the right is going to find a way to, bring it up and really talk about it, even though, kind of bring up the hypocrisy. And I hope to see them own it. But the reality is they're gonna say as much radical stuff as they can without losing their support. But they want to get those votes.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Eze, but I would also just add on to that, I think that the Trump campaign seems to be a bit confused about what their messaging actually needs to be as it relates to, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. It seems to me that they try to characterize them as radical leftists, but the actual tangible policy record that both of these candidates have is nothing of the sort. So in a weird, strange way, it seems as though that Trump on some issues involving, criminal justice and things like that in relation to the prisons is somewhat to the left on some issues that Joe Biden is on. So it's weird that he doesn't kind of want to take that ground and kind of, make it so that people think that Kamala Harris is all about locking people up, which she was when she was out in San Francisco and when she was in California. I mean, she did all sorts of things to lock, poor people and communities of color up. But it's weird that Trump doesn't recognize that he and his policy agenda and the First Step Act and some of that stuff is more on the left than some of the original policies of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were. But he still wants to paint them as radical leftists, which doesn't really make any sense because their policy record doesn't match up. So there's a little bit of a disconnect, and I think he's trying to send two messages out at the same time. which is why it's very difficult for anything to stick on either of them, because people seem just confused about it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we have an issue where we have the top of the ticket, the Republican incumbent versus the Democratic nominee, battling over who is more law and order. Like, and maybe if I were in a privileged status, I'd be like, yeah, this would be an issue that I'd be, really concerned about. I mean, I am concerned about it, but as a Black person, I'm horrified to see that this is the debate. Like, this is the best that we have been able to muster for the 2020 presidential election. People who are going to argue about who is more adamant about locking up people of color and definitely squelching protests. Joe Biden wants to give police more money. He has called protests, anarchists and criminals and suggested that they be locked up. So nobody right now, politics wise, is on the side of the people who are fighting in the street, at least nobody on the top of the ticket. I want us to move along real quick, gang, because actually, Andrew, there was a story that you had brought up, and speaking of protesters, about a new law that has been passed in Tennessee, I believe signed by the governor there, that would deprive people convicted of protesting their right to vote. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, exactly, Kim. So the GOP-controlled state General Assembly passed this measure last week during a 3-day special legislative session, and it was signed without any announcement earlier this week. Among other things, the new law stipulates that people who illegally camp on state property will face a Class E felony charge, punishable by up to 6 years in prison, and people found guilty of a felony in the state of Tennessee automatically lose their right to vote. So the new law also slaps a mandatory 45-day sentence for aggravated rioting, and it boosts the fine for blocking highway access to emergency vehicles, and enhances the punishment for aggravated assault against a first responder to a Class C felony. But lawmakers advanced the bill amid nearly 3 months of frequent protests outside of the Capitol. The mostly young Black activists who spearheaded the demonstration had basically been calling for racial justice reforms and for a meeting with the Tennessee Republican Governor Bill Lee. So it's just kind of part and parcel of a larger story that you kind of have also drawn attention to, Kim, which is the story that ties into how those arrested at the Portland protests were told that they couldn't attend more protests as a condition of their bail. And, there's a pending lawsuit on that case in Seattle. And it also ties into how protesters are being priced out of exercising their right to freedom of speech in the First Amendment because they have to buy so much equipment in order to counteract the police tactics that are incredibly violent that are being used and deployed around the country.
Oh my gosh. I mean, when you see protesters in the streets with helmets, goggles, masks, stuff that they can breathe through the tear gas and the pepper spray that's been inflicted upon them by law enforcement. I mean, yeah, that's a grip that you got to come out your pocket with just to remain safe, to go exercise your constitutionally protected right to freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. But, Eze Jackson, when you hear that the Tennessee state legislature, along with the governor, have now criminalized protest actions, made it a felonious endeavor, a felonious charge if you block traffic on the highway, which is a tactic that many organizations have used in order to bring attention to their issue and to their cause. I mean, you're criminalizing people's constitutional rights. And I don't think that this is going to be the first state that takes these kinds of actions against protesters.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I learned from working in politics was that politicians and the political structure in this country has done a really good job of convincing people that they are the power, like they are the control, the dictators. They, people, often when you're an organizer and you're training young activists or older activists or first-time activists how to come to their state capitol and testify before elected officials, right? It's a very intimidating process. They think that, but then they realize these are just people, you learn that they work for us. But we find these instances like this where it's like, you're not allowed to hold us accountable. That's just shit that we say on the campaign trail. But you're not really allowed to hold us accountable. And that's what we're seeing right here. And this just goes back to what we were talking about at the top of the show. Like, this is white supremacy at work. This is like, oh no, y'all not going to keep calling us out for what's wrong. Because we want to keep going.
Yeah, and on top of that too, I think that one of the things that gives me hope about the progressive movement that we're seeing right now is that we are seeing that some of these people, especially right-leaning Democrats, are being held accountable because their asses are getting primaried all the time. So, I mean, we have to continue the pressure on that and make them realize that there is a deep political, personal consequence to them continuing the nature of these destructive policies and exacerbating these problems in communities of color and poor working class and white communities around this country. And so if they continue to do that and they continue to side with the elites and continue to build larger power structures and the infrastructure like this law in Tennessee to further insulate themselves from the power of the people, then that shit needs to get shut down and we're going to primary you and you're going to be gone. So that's the way it needs to operate moving forward. And then with all these new elections with Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush and other people, I think that there is some hope to kind of addressing that. But at the same time, the Democratic establishment is very scared of that because they recognize that that's a direct threat to their power and their organizing ability within their own party.
Look, so much so, Andrew, that the fact that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi endorsed Joe Kennedy as he attempts to primary incumbent Ed Markey in this the Senate race in Massachusetts. Ed Markey is the incumbent, more progressive than Joe Kennedy by far. And the fact that Nancy Pelosi, one of the top establishment Democrats, is going to throw her support again for another establishment. I mean, what the fuck has Joe Kennedy done besides been born a motherfucking Kennedy? Excuse my language, but I mean, you know what I mean? So the Democrat establishment has made it very clear that they are not here for your little progressive upstart bullshit. Like they will get behind the establishment person come hella high water, even if it ends up in defeat. But my God, they're not even being subtle about it, about how much they abhor progressivism and progressive candidates.
And this is why too that they have the centrist Democrats and Biden and Harris have no real interest of sharing a platform of policy with those on the left, because you saw the convention last week. They trotted out these old warmonger Republicans like Colin Powell giving a speech about the denigration of democracy and destruction of our society. Dude, you led the whole charge for the Iraq war at the UN and lied about that and killed millions of Iraqis and thousands of soldiers, you know, in the U.S. and people who have PTSD and their lives are permanently altered because of your batshit crazy war policies. So why are we going to believe you? I mean, this just goes to show the Democratic establishment, in my estimation, they just seem like they actually actively do hate the left more than they honestly hate Trump, which is almost unfathomable.
That's accurate. That's extremely accurate. Very much so. Guys, I want us to move on and talk about COVID. Remember that hoe? I mean, COVID just been out here doing terrible things to our society, especially to communities of color, Black, Latinx, Native American communities, feeling the effects of this virus at high disproportionate levels. We're looking at close to 180,000 people have died, or over 180,000 people have died, over 5 million infections, and we are just getting started. We ain't even got the flu season yet. It ain't even really got cold. We're in for a roller coaster ride when it comes to this virus come the fall. But the problem is we have incompetence at the top, and beyond incompetence, the Trump administration is outright malicious with some of their policies around COVID, namely the most recent one announced with new FDA guidelines, which scales back the amount of testing. The FDA said this week that they are deprioritizing testing asymptomatic carriers. If you are not displaying symptoms of COVID, the FDA backed by the Trump administration says, we probably don't need to test you, which most public health officials say is a terrible idea. The only way that we're going to get a true handle of this virus is to fully understand how much it has penetrated our population and understanding that significant amounts of people are asymptomatic, showing no symptoms of COVID. So we all are familiar with the White House Coronavirus Task Force, right? With our favorite, little grizzled scientist, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Well, Dr. Fauci is going to be out of the pocket for a few weeks because Dr. Fauci had to have surgery on his vocal cords because he had some sort of growth there. And it was caused by talking a lot for weeks upon end and hours every day. Dr. Anthony Fauci has been out here trying to sound the alarm about COVID and what are the best measures to do to help America recover from COVID. But Dr. Fauci was not consulted on this latest set of guidelines deprioritizing asymptomatic testing. And I want us to look at this clip from CNN. And I'm so sorry for making y'all watch CNN. I never watched CNN, but I saw this clip and I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of interesting, actually. It is with Jake Tapper, and I think this is Dr. Sanjay Gupta. And apparently Dr. Fauci had spoken directly to Sanjay Gupta about this issue and how he was not consulted, and the Trump administration actually lied about Dr. Fauci's support of this new policy change. So let's take a look at that, Dwayne.
Thank you so much. I want to bring in CNN's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. And Sanjay, we just learned that the Coronavirus Task Force approved these CDC changes, this rule change that Dr. Osterholm last hour said he knows that he can't understand any health reason for it. But you just spoke with Dr. Fauci, who's on that task force. What did he have to tell you?
Well, so this task force meeting where this apparently was discussed was last Thursday. So I was asking Dr. Fauci about this, and he said this. I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I get it right. He said, I was under general anesthesia in the operating room last Thursday, was not part of any discussion or deliberation regarding these new testing recommendations. And he went on to say, I'm concerned about the interpretation of these recommendations and worried it will give people the incorrect assumption that asymptomatic spread is not of great concern. In fact, it is. So, Jake, he wasn't part of the deliberations or discussions, and this is a problem, right? I mean, because Admiral Giroir was just asked about this on a briefing, and he said Dr. Fauci signed off on this. He wasn't part of these discussions. He was in the operating room, for one thing. But also, he doesn't agree with this in the sense that he thinks that this may give people the incorrect assumption that asymptomatic transmission is no big deal. It is a big deal, and we can talk about that. But this is worrisome. I mean, this is a clear schism, clear difference. We heard one thing from Admiral Giroir on the task force, and now we're hearing something different from Dr. Anthony Fauci.
They done sat up there and told a lie on Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci was sitting up there in the hospital under anesthesia, and decisions are being made in his name, alleging that they have his support. Andrew, what the fuck is going on with this COVID and as it relates to how the Trump administration is handling it? But before you answer, really quick, Dwayne, pop up that tweet from the Tampa Bay Times about how the medical examiners in Florida no longer have to certify that the cause of death on death certificates as COVID-19. So the medical examiners panel, it's a board, it's a 9-member board in the state of Florida, has decided that COVID-19 no longer has to be listed as the cause of death on death certificates. This is after Florida is on fire with COVID. Okay, that's the wrong tweet, honey, but that's okay. it's the Tampa Bay Times, by G. That ain't it, but it's cool. I'm gonna tell the people all about it. That's all right. Sometimes we mislabel things. There we go. The medical examiner is no longer required to certify COVID-19 deaths in Florida. And this is after, again, it's been a shit show of handling the COVID virus in Florida. The deaths have gone down, but this is after Florida was putting up 10,000 deaths a day for a sustained period of time, I think close to 2 weeks. And Andrew, when we deprioritize testing, which means we're sticking our heads in the sand, we really don't want to know how many people have coronavirus. And you're telling, at least in one state where the virus was running rampant, especially through nursing homes, that we no longer have to list COVID-19 as the cause of death. The Trump administration is trying to bury this pandemic and the seriousness of it in advance of the election.
Yeah, I mean, that's an election strategy. I mean, is allowing people to die without knowing what they're dying from, as it relates to COVID, is a Trump administration campaign strategy. I mean, I don't know what else to make of it other than that. I mean, they want to present this idea that we're reopening and that everything is back to normal when we don't have a vaccine, we don't have proper testing. We're not doing the rapid test. They're not expanding some of these rapid tests, which could actually let you know, almost instantaneously if you have it or not. And they're systematically destroying the testing apparatus that we have. And they're trying to claim that the top infectious disease expert is on board with all this stuff while he's in the middle of a surgery, because he's been trying to negate these Trump talking points constantly by going on television and trying to make sure the American people are aware of the severity of the situation. So, I mean, I can't see this as any other, policy other than to ramp up, the drumbeat for, okay, everything's fine, we can get back to normal. And the only reason that we can get back to normal is because, Trump saved humanity, basically, is the Trump campaign election assessment. So it's really a farce, and it should be able to be seen through by most people in America. But unfortunately, we have a cult of people that worship Trump in American society and or vote for him and culturally empathize with him and what have you. So they view anything he says as fact and anything that anyone else says as fiction. And it's on par with some of the level of the propagandization of media and all these sorts of things in third-rate, post-Soviet dictatorships like Turkmenistan and other places. So, I mean, this is the road we're heading down if we elect Donald Trump again as president of the United States. And it's not surprising that he's using public health as a politicized issue to not account properly for what's going on with the coronavirus. So it makes him look better.
Eze Jackson, two things here. First of all, we know that this level of laissez-faire, of pretty much carelessness when it comes to dealing with this pandemic, would not be happening if a majority of the victims from COVID-19 were non-Black, white people. Okay. If this was impacting so-called white middle America, it would be all hands on deck kind of thing. But also, Joe Biden needs to be smacking Donald Trump in the teeth with this COVID-19, because for all Biden's flaws, if there was a compelling reason to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it is because the likelihood that they would have fumbled the pandemic this badly is much less than what Trump has actually done.
Yeah, I mean, that their side has always been very clear that they worship the almighty dollar. I think the Democrats are less overt about it, and they have their times. But, when it comes to, compassion and basic human rights and human needs, like the Republican Party has always been tone deaf on that. Their followers have always been tone deaf on that. I mean, even when we're sitting here talking today about Black Lives Matter, and sometimes, somehow they've taken a cause that's supposed to be about, the lives of people, and all of a sudden turning them into, terrorists and this crazy talk. So it's not surprising to see this, because the almighty dollar is their main focus. So anytime money is being lost, they will change a narrative. They will jeopardize lives and livelihood so that money can continue to come in. And that's what's happening.
All right, gang. Well, listen, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. I'd like to thank Eze Jackson and Andrew Corkery for joining us today. Stir Crazy episode number 82. Good goodness. Thank y'all so much for stopping by and sharing your wonderful, valuable perspectives. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim. I love the show. I love coming on talking to y'all. Great job with that piece you put together too, Andrew.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry you had to sit through all that.
yeah, it's about an hour worth of craziness to sift through, but I watched it on double time, so it made it only a half hour, so that was better.
Nice.
Well, you've earned your J today, sir. Go and roll up and toke, knowing that, that it was a job. Well done. Just a heads up, gang, for everyone that's watching, no show tomorrow. We will return on Tuesday for Stir Crazy episode number 83. So join us next week. We certainly appreciate everyone that hang out in the chat and in the comments. If you have anything you want to let us know, you can always email us, stircrazy@therealnews.com. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Y'all have a good weekend. Listen, the Rona is still out here very much jumping on people. So please, social distance, stay away from people. Assume people have the Rona. When you are out and about, wear your mask, wash your hands. Don't fuck around, please, because the Rona is out here killing people, and I do not want it to kill you. So have a good weekend. Social distance, wash your hands, wear your mask. See y'all later. Bye.